Good morning, everyone. This is Tracy Zimmerman with the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation. I see lots of folks logging in as I speak, so we're going to give everyone a minute or two to log into the webinar, and then we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so this is Tracy Zimmerman. As I said, I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation. We are really excited to have with us today Mariana McCall, who's the founding partner of the Trust for Learning, and Rich Neiman, who's president of the Neiman Collaborative, to talk about their research on parents as consumers and what that might mean for all of us who are working in the early learning space. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to them, and then at the end of their presentation, we'll have the opportunity for folks to ask questions. If you have a question, just type it into the question box, and I will serve as moderator to ask them. We have too many folks on the webinar to do individual phone questions, but we'll be sure to get to as many of them as we can. So I am going to turn it over to Mariana to get us started. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Tracy, and thanks for organizing this for us. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We are so excited to share these remarkable research findings with you. This is the first comprehensive study of parents as consumers of early childhood education. After surveying the existing research, we found that many had done good research on where parents and the public were, but there was little insight into why they were there and how to get them to where they can and should be. This new research thoroughly probes parent aspirations and motivations when it comes to seeking out early childhood education programs and resources. It provides us with a map for making stronger connections with them on a number of levels, communicating the value of high-quality, developmentally based programs, delivering programs that truly develop the capabilities parents seek in their children, increasing parent engagement and satisfaction, and why we should elevate the role and stature of teachers. The Trust for Learning advances what we call ideal learning, highly developmental, child-centric, early education that creates a capable, well-rounded child. I'm happy to report that what we call ideal learning was constantly and consistently described as ideal early learning for participants' children in their own terms and without any prompting from us. What we found was pretty incredible and transformational for all of our advocacy efforts. Parents understand the value of high-quality programs and can recognize what those programs look like. They want their children to develop the moral, social, and emotional skills that will prepare them to be capable adults. Most of all, they know that these programs exist, but they're frustrated because they can't put their children in the best available programs because of cost, location, or lack of availability. Rich Neiman from the social impact marketing firm Neiman Collaborative We'll dive deeper on the findings and their implications. You can find this presentation as well as full research reports on our website, trustforlearning.org. Thanks again for joining us, and I will turn it over to Rich.
Thank you, Mariana, and thank you all for being here today. I'm going to go through the research. There's a lot here. You can certainly see it also on the website, as Mariana said, so don't feel freaked out if you're missing things or I'm going too fast. You can always go back and get it on your own. So let's start. You know, Mariana spoke about the trust role in this research, but I really want to emphasize one critical part of their mission, which should be a mission for all of us, and that's creating a product that is in line with developmental science and the goals of parents, and doing it for all parents, not just for those who can afford to send their kids to ideal learning programs, but to make sure that each child gets the ideal early learning they need in order to get a great start in life and to be able to have a great finish in their life as well. The intent of this research was really to change the behavior of providers and their products and the way they talk about their products and connect with parents. The trust with its highly developmental ideal learning providers wanted to drive deeper connections to parents because children don't choose early childhood education programs. Their parents do. And what we found among ideal learning providers and what sort of motivated us to do this research is they were always talking in very technical terms about curriculum and quality and what parents needed to know. And we felt that that was going over the heads of parents and they weren't really connecting as well as they could, although they were providing the programs that every child needed. Part of connecting with parents is messaging, about talking about what you do. I know many of the providers and the advocates who are on this phone, if not all of them, are providing like really great, high quality early childhood education. Being able to message that to parents and connect is really important, but the best messages you'll see from this research is an ideal product and how it's delivered to parents. So we really have to look at what programs do, because that sends the greatest message to parents on a daily basis. This research is really different. We don't go out and ask people what they think in the moment. We try and figure out why they think, what motivates them. And so we do what's called motivational research, and that unearths what people care about and how they make decisions. And we can actually quantify and look at what's important to them in terms of priorities and how they go from the attributes that they want in a program to the kind of value that they have in what they want to see in their children. The most important thing here is that we don't ask people questions that we're interested in. We don't do focus groups where we say, you know, here's how we want to engage you as parents. What do you think? What we do is we ask them what they are interested in. We get their unaided responses, and then we group them and statistically test them. So we did focus groups to listen to their perceptions on three things. What do they feel is an ideal young adult that they are trying to get to through early childhood education? What is ideal early learning that will help them achieve those aspirations? And how does that make them feel? And that second part is really important because satisfaction is a combination of the delivery of the product and how people feel that product is delivered. So in healthcare, for example, you can go to a doctor who gives you great medical outcomes, but if the doctor has no bedside manner, you don't have emotional outcomes and you feel unsatisfied about that, or you feel unhealed. What we did is we took their responses across what they wanted in attributes and benefits, the emotions that they would feel, and the ultimate value they're going to, and we group them, and you'll see that later. And it corresponds a lot to Maslow's hierarchy of self-actualization. And then the terms and the features and perceptions and trends were put into nodes and quantified through survey research, and then statistically prioritized into dominant pathways about how people moved from the attributes up to the ultimate values that they wanted. You'll see here of the focus groups, there were 12 groups in 4 communities with different socioeconomic groups and racial groups. They were about 2 hours long. There was an aspect in here where we wanted to make sure that people were civically active so that they were registered to vote in the 2016 election. We did this because we feel that these parents are the ones that are most likely to be involved in their community and spread word among other parents about what they want. And you'll see later how critically important peer pressure is in selecting programs. They were grouped by income, race, and we did them in Minneapolis, Seattle, Dallas, and New Haven. The overall findings that we have are that parents feel that they're in charge, not the programs themselves. So the didactic approach that we sometimes take about early childhood educators know better than parents, parents say that we know what's best and we need a partner. They know what quality is and they have trouble getting it. And the big points underneath this is that social and emotional development, particularly behavioral and moral development, are the critical aspects that they want as a foundation for enduring success in school and adulthood. The parents feel strongly that they hold the primary responsibility and power to shape their child's social and emotional development, and that practical barriers, very practical barriers, really interfere with them achieving their aspirations. Those are not surprising to you. They're cost, availability, and logistics and distance. And logistics and distance is a really big factor. You may have a great program that's across town. They will choose a lesser program if they can't make it fit into their commute or the other things that they have to do with their older children. These barriers really weigh heavily on parents. We find throughout this, and it's seen in a lot of other research, that parents are anxious about their children. They understand that early childhood education is a high stakes proposition now in terms of their child's competitiveness and their development into a productive and capable adult. And they really worry about having these elements, particularly low-income parents and parents of color. In the focus groups, we asked them, what is ideal development? And you'll see here everything that they self-identified in the realms of social, emotional, and intellectual. These are a lot of words here, and it's a lot to read, but basically what they're identifying is everything that all the social science says that you need to have in order to have a very capable and productive and connected person as an adult. So they are very sophisticated across the socioeconomic spectrum in what they want to see, and they're very engaged with their children. What we did with all of those things is we quantified them in this national survey of 1,449 parents. And you'll see here, I'm not going to go into it in a lot of depth, that we tried to make sure that it was really representative of the U.S. population in terms of geographic, socioeconomic, and ethnic backgrounds. And we also wanted to make sure that they had a wide range of early childhood experiences. So some were expecting through age 3, some were 4 to 7 years old, others were 8 to 16 years old. So people who had gone through the system that could see the value of it, people who were entering the system that wanted value at it, and people who were still in ECE. And then there was all sorts of breakdowns according to how they participated in out-of-home programs, out-of-home public options, hybrid models, home-based. You'll see their traditional and the environments that they're in now, a lot of them later on, their kids later on in life, traditional public school, private school, and those elements. What we found was that the vast majority, 70%, feel that formal early childhood education is the best thing for their child. And I have to tell you that this is a quantum shift of where parents were a decade ago. Parents clearly value early childhood education now, and this value cuts across the socioeconomic spectrum with very surprising results. We hear throughout the early childhood community and throughout other places that low-income parents and minority parents are less motivated to send their children to early childhood education programs, particularly center-based care. That is simply not true. What you see here is a question we asked of all parents, which is how they break down between three statements. So Joan says, it'd be great to send my child to the best program, but it's probably out of my budget. Smith says it's totally worth whatever time and investment, and Johnson says there's too much fuss. That 30% on too much fuss was the majority 10 years ago. Look at here where African Americans and Hispanics are most likely to agree that the best programs are worth whatever it takes. Their aspirations are higher than the total at 76%. Hispanics in the same way. So you're really seeing that that they're placing a higher emphasis on quality and a higher emphasis on investment. We also asked people how they collect information to decide on programs. You're going to see here now that school visits are the most important, but look at how important talking to neighbors and friends are and talking with relatives and family. This really talks about consumer satisfaction being driven by the idea of what they're hearing from those most close to them, and that would precipitate a school visit. So really the satisfaction of the people you're serving now and the satisfaction within your community is going to drive greater numbers of parents to come to you. We also asked them what was most important to them, and all these factors are important. The numbers are very high across the board, and the intensity is relatively high across the board. But once we got all this, we asked them what's essential, what's important but not essential, and what's of lesser importance. And basically, quality of teachers and staff comes up to the fore, and then safety of the school and learning environment. And that shouldn't be surprising to anybody, but this idea that we see over and over again about how important teachers are as the ambassadors and representatives of the program itself, it's almost like all the curriculum and the care and the consultation and all the support that's around the teacher is put through the teacher, and the teacher is the relationship with the school. And that's why we say you really have to focus on teacher competencies and qualifications, the way they communicate with parents and the way they represent the program, because they are the program for the parents. So let's look at the parent aspirations, and I'm going to show you this crazy chart here with all sorts of what we call distinct lenses. What happened in the focus groups, remember when I showed you all those elements that they identified as ideal? They were actually grouped according to thought, statistically grouped. And you'll see on the left attributes, benefits, emotions, and values. So what we're doing is we're moving people through this idea of what are the attributes of this child? What benefit would those attributes give them? How does that make you feel, right? And how does that make that child? And then what is the ultimate value to that child? Underneath each of these are a whole load of descriptions, and I'll show you those later. But what we do is we kind of force people to see what pathways they are. And the dominant pathway of about 33% of the parents we talk to nationally is this one. They want their children to be emotionally prepared. That will lead their children to have knowledge and a sense of self, which will make the child capable, and that will help the child reach their fulfillment. And take a look at this node capable here, because it comes up over and over and over again. Every one of the pathways among all the parents runs through capable as the single emotion that they want to see their child have, and the thing that really engages them as parents, knowing that their child is going to be capable. I told you that that there are different nodes to these things. Another node that was in here is emotionally prepared. And here are the things underneath emotionally prepared. This was the second most dominated pathway. And you'll see that emotionally prepared is defined as having confidence in self, is internally motivated, can say what they know and want and feel. That leads to a sense of self, which is creativity, self-expression, healthy relationships, independence, becoming independent thinkers, and then knowledge in terms of being able to build their intelligence, prepares them to excel academically. It is not about academics at all. And then let's take a look at capable. The child is competent, confident, focused, smart, capable, secure, empowered. If you were to tell a parent what an early childhood education program does for their child, you would go right to capable and say competent, confident, focused, smart, capable, secure, and empowered. That leads to fulfillment, which is high self-esteem, happy with self, sense of belonging, enjoys life, inner peace, emotionally secure. Over on the right is something critically important, which is the parent emotions. It's not enough to just deliver this. It's really about how we deliver it in a way that helps parents feel that they are being the best possible parent. To be a parent is to be highly anxious all the time, with it interrupted by brief moments of joy and a feeling that you're doing things right. So if we can get the child up to fulfillment, the parent feels that they're a good parent, which is the ultimate value for the parent, that they gave the child a better future and they feel good about themselves. They also feel in harmony with their children and their family and their beliefs. And they feel interconnected because they're passing on a legacy of raising the next generation as they were raised. The predominant parent emotion, if they can follow this pathway up to fulfillment, is feeling fortunate. And that's something we should really stress here, because feeling fortunate means that they feel like being able to do this is really a hard task, and some people are more fortunate than others in having this resource. It makes them feel proud, and it also makes them feel competent as a parent. The other pathway that runs through this is being behaviorally prepared, but it still goes through capable, and that goes through accountability, which is self-accountability. Real-world readiness is really about somebody who is able to deal with others and be respectful, and that goes up to a value of self-reliance. And then the other one is behaviorally prepared, which is really about being executive functioning. Again, it goes through real-world readiness, accountability, capable, and self-reliant. So if we take all three of those pathways, what it tells us is that this is the motivation map for 76% of the parents in the country when they select early childhood programs. They want their children to be morally prepared, behaviorally prepared, and emotionally prepared. That leads to real-world readiness, accountability, a sense of self and knowledge. It goes through the emotion that the child is capable, and the end value of that child is they're going to be capable of fulfillment, purpose, and self-reliant. So were you to supply and message these attributes, benefits, and emotions and values, you would not only connect with parents and gain greater appreciation for your work, you would also reach more children and fulfill your mission. This is really what they want out of early childhood education. I'm going to show you the message pathways for African Americans and then Latinos. I hate to show you this slide, and the reason why I hate to show you this slide is because the previous slide reaches 76% of parents, right? Within that are low-income parents and minority parents, and that frame works for almost every parent you talk to who wants early childhood education. The differences between African Americans and low-income people and Hispanics is so very, very slight that I even hate to show it, because everybody always asks us, well, those populations need something different or want something different, and they don't. We get that from people on the left, and we get it from the people on the right. And when I point out these slight differences, which are really nuances, people immediately focus on them instead of the commonalities. And the true aha moment of this research is the commonality of all patients and the tragedy of how little access low income and people of color have relative to others, and that they value these programs more. African Americans place slightly more emphasis on academic preparation and academic performance and a sense of self. From the focus groups, we gained the insight that this is really a recognition of what they need to do to compete in a society where they feel that they have to be twice as good to get half as much. Sense of self is particularly important to them in terms of dealing with some of the systemic racism that is out there. In terms of Hispanics, they place slightly more emphasis on citizenship preparation and socially prepared. Citizenship is not U.S. citizenship. It's really the qualities that help somebody get along in a group and contribute, and socially prepared is kind of the same way, but it's more about interaction with people. Again, they follow the same pathway as everybody else, and you'll see it from this statistic here, where regardless of income level, they're aligned with the overall sample in identifying ideal outcomes for their children. These numbers are not tremendously different, and rather than income and social and cultural experiences tied to race and ethnicity, there's just slight differentiation in parent aspirations. We've highlighted them in bold here, but when you look across to the others, they're barely significant. It really is a nuance, and so you should go with that major pathway. So at the same time that we did this research, one of the funders for this was James Walton, and what he wanted to do is explore K through 12 education as well. James is a big supporter of highly developmental ideal learning programs, particularly Montessori. But one of his things is to make sure that parents get what they want from programs in order to be able to reach the aspirations they have for their children. So what you're looking at here is the K through 12 parent perspective map. And when you look at this map, you see a lot of things that are really, really similar to the early childhood education. And for those of you who are working on K through third grade alignment, this is a particularly important thing to look at. Life skills at the node at the bottom is the starting point for people in K through 12, that's the attribute they want in the beginning, but it really reflects the endpoint of moral, behavioral, and emotional preparation in early childhood education. When we look at life skills, that's what that is, coming from early childhood education. And so what I'm going to show you now is the alignment between early childhood education and K through 12. It's going to look really funky, but really, if you look at that bottom attributes, morally prepared, behaviorally prepared, and emotionally prepared are really life skills once they start kindergarten. Respectfulness, real-world aptitude, and self-actualization really correspond with the smaller benefits underneath it that early childhood provide. Capable and capable are still there, still a huge intersection. And then there's enthused, which is the motivation that the self-motivation that parents want to see in people accomplishing their goals. And then connection, contribution, and independence really isn't that much different from fulfillment, purpose, and self-reliance in early childhood education. The big aha moment from this is that even in this K through 12 track, only 7% of parents were on a totally academic track, and yet most of what's offered in K through 12 education is a completely academic track. Parents want social and emotional development and connection and capability throughout the entire throughput from birth to 12. So 12th grade. So what does this mean in terms of messaging and analysis and delivering products? Very briefly, parents are in charge. We cannot have this idea that as early childhood educators, we know what's best for children. They actually know what's best for children, and it may be intuitive and it may not be in the jargon that we use as educators, but we really have to recognize that they're on the same page with us, that they want the same things. And the only way for us to deliver high quality to children is to really respect their agency and deliver a high quality experience. Educating parents on quality is totally counterproductive. What we should be doing is really explaining how ideal early learning helps them achieve their goals for their children. And that's the best way to advance highly developmental programs and high quality programs for all children. So the big takeaway here is that parents want highly personalized. They want their child to be known. They want their child's potential to be known. They want their challenges to be known, and they want a personalized education plan for that child to be fully developed. And they want their child to be a well-rounded and productive adult. They are not looking for one aspect. They are looking for all aspects of capability. They want to partner in their child's development. They don't want another parent, and they don't want to be parented by early childhood programs. Quality for them is an experience. It's not an education. They already know what quality is. So we need to communicate the aspirations and the intended outcomes, not the process. We're talking to them over and over again about curriculum. You're talking to them about the vehicles. They're really looking for the outcomes. And so focus on the outcomes and then talk about how the vehicles get them there. Availability is the biggest barrier, and social justice for that reason is equitable access to uniform, high-quality, personalized developmental early childhood education in every community, regardless of whether somebody can afford to pay for it. The ideal has to be made real because the ideal is what works for everybody, and the ideal is what the vast majority of parents want. The other thing is to bring the teachers to the front because they're the touchstones for quality. Here's what we really need to focus on, both in terms of communicating to people, but more importantly, the very basic, simple elements of every program, which is that we're helping children to become morally, behaviorally, and emotionally prepared. We're helping them develop a sense of self, accountability, knowledge, and real-world readiness. We're creating a capable person who's focused, competent, smart, secure, and empowered. We're enabling their fulfillment, self-reliance, and purpose, and we're helping parents achieve a sense of pride and accomplishment. We know that people are we're so focused on developing that child and taking a developmental approach to meeting the child and taking them where they need to go. We have to take the same developmental approach to parents. You really have to spend a lot of time with them in order to get the outcomes that you want for the children. So how do we meet parents with product? And what parents really want is ideal learning. And this is what developmental science tells us that each child needs. And here's what it looks like from all perspectives, from the parent's perspective, from what we know works, and from all the research. And the product is laying the early foundation to help each child develop into a well-rounded adult who can embrace life and is capable of seizing opportunities and overcoming challenges. That they partner with parents to help them develop children who are morally, emotionally, and behaviorally prepared. And that all teachers in the programs support each child's natural development. Parents very much wanted programs where children could follow their interests to develop strong skills in academics and knowledge, leadership, self-discipline, responsibility, independence, and initiative. These are not didactic approaches. These are developmental approaches where the teacher and the child are kind of on the same level and learning together. The classrooms are hands-on. They want them self-paced, collaborative, joyful, and that creates really a lifelong learner and doer. Each child receives a personalized approach to their education. They understand that they're going to be in a program with other children, but each child needs to have a personalized approach. So we're not talking about every child, we're talking about each child aggregating up to everyone. That they're known and appreciated for their unique abilities, interests, and potential. That children and teachers learn together and they set high standards for themselves without standardization. Parents do not want the creep of K through 12 standardization into early childhood education. They will absolutely reject it. And everyone on the staff, parents, teachers, are working on this true goal of developing a well-rounded, intelligent, and capable person who contributes to the world. All these essential elements you can find on the Trust for Learning website under this resource link. They are actually written in education speak, not in parent speak and public speak. So if you're a provider and you're looking at the essential elements of what is an ideal learning program from a parent perspective and from a practice perspective, you can find that confluence there. To the extent that it's helpful for you, Trust for Learning on their website at www.trustforlearning.org has put out a whole load of materials that basically talk about the research itself, the key findings. There's a long report, there's a short report, there's a social media toolkit that you can use to send people back if you're doing advocacy about the type of ECE you're trying to put forward. So really these resources are there. This presentation will be distributed to you. And there is also a presentation up on the website. The Trust is really a great source for high quality developmental early learning in and of itself, and this is another asset on their website. So with that, I thank you, and we can open it up for questions.
Yes, so just remember, if you have a question, to please go ahead and type it in the question box, and we'll be able to pose those to both Rich and to Mariana. And while we're waiting for that, I will start. Rich, I know, we have a wide range of folks who are participating in the webinar, and so can you give some guidance for those who may be not working directly with parents, but perhaps are advocating with policymakers on these types of issues, how they might use this type of information and how it should inform their messaging?
Yeah, I mean, we think that this information is critically important for advocates who are talking to policymakers. Basically, we're at this point now where policymakers know they have to do something about early childhood education. The price of it is too high for parents, and the stakes are too high as well. And if you look at the research done by other groups like First 5 Years Fund, and even the research you've done in North Carolina on how parents feel about early childhood education, they want access to high quality early childhood education. And that we think is going to happen at some point. What is still up in the air is what is access to, and access is really access to quality. And this research can be used to show politicians what parents want out of this. That, they can provide parents with access, but if they're frustrated that they're not getting access to the quality they need to prepare their children for school and life, there's going to be a backlash. And, these programs are expensive to implement, but they're not so expensive that we can't implement quality. In North Carolina with Smart Start and in other places around the country, people are implementing quality at similar price points. And it's very important that advocates use this research to show what parents and voters want. There is another overlay on this, that these are both parents and their voters. And so if you really want to reach them, it's not just enough to talk about access, it's about access to quality with all these values.
Thank you. A couple of people have asked about the presentation, so it will be available both on the Trust for Learning website. We will have it on our website as well, and you'll get an email following the webinar that has a link to the recording and the PDF of the PowerPoint as well. So there'll be lots of ways to access it. I have a question here about how can the tools available and information in the essential elements be used to engage parents as advocates?
To engage parents as what?
As advocates.
I think that you should actually, the essential elements are really written for education, early education professionals and policymakers. But what you should really use to talk to parents is really these things. Focus on these aspects. This is your message framework for parents to engage them in ideal learning. And then these points here about meeting parents with product. This is really the message framework for engaging parents. If you were to talk to them about these elements, or to incorporate these elements or this messaging that you see here into your communications with parents, you would get greater support for your developmental programs. I would not use this messaging if you cannot provide these, if you're not currently providing parents with these programs, because if you use this and they go there, they're smart enough to know that they're not getting it, and there's going to be a huge backlash.
Right. Okay, here's another one. Conventional wisdom has been, quote, parents are children's first and best teachers. Did you get a sense of how you see parents' perceptions in their roles as educators for their children?
Oh yeah, there's a slide here that I didn't show that is really pretty telling. We asked them about all the different things they did during the course of their interactions with children that they thought were critically important. Going on family outings, going to the zoo and a museum, going shopping and talking about, these are all things they volunteered. Going shopping and talking about the food and where it comes from. This and this, and there's a long list of things. And in the middle of that list is sending my child to an early childhood program. In the middle of that list at 40, in importance at about 40 or 50%. So parents actually believe that during the course of their day, they are providing these things to their children, and parents across the socioeconomic spectrum. And that what we're seeing when we say that providers are partners with parents, when you're coming in at that middle part, parents are recognizing that what they need from you is something extra that they cannot provide, either because they're working, both parents are working, or both parents, in many cases in low-income families, are working 2 and 3 jobs at different shifts just to make ends meet. So they're relying upon you as a partner, and they are doing a lot of stuff at home that it is really parent as the primary teacher of the child. And now I have that question, it just tells me that I've really got to put that slide back into this presentation, because it really is amazing about how much they're volunteering of what they're doing as educators and how strongly they feel about it.
I think that is really powerful. And actually, the person who asked that question was hoping that the group could have access to that slide and that information. It either suggests that the efforts to help parents understand what's happening with young children and the importance of those kinds of interactions have been very successful, or that parents have known this all along, and those messages, I guess, are just reinforcing that. So I find that really interesting. All right, here's our next.
Yeah, let me get that slide to you.
Okay, great. Do you have any suggestions for helping with the frustration parents experience when they are not able to access what they know they want for their children? Situations where equitable access does not yet exist. It would seem this could be a focus of parent advocacy.
Yeah, it could be, and that's a really great question. Frustration has to go someplace, right? So it kind of sits there for a while until it boils over and then something happens. So you saw that recently with the student movement coming out of the Parkland slayings, where it was the students themselves who went out and finally expressed their frustration and said, oh, you know what, we can really ask for something. It takes a long time for that to happen unless people tell other people what they can ask for. In early childhood education, because parental agency is so strong, that culturally Americans feel that they're responsible for their child from birth to birth to kindergarten. And then once they get to kindergarten, that's kind of when the larger system traditionally takes over, and they are more like they're actively involved in education, but they're more of a spectator because it's out of their, much more of it is out of their realm of expertise. In early childhood, this is my responsibility for my child. So there is less this idea of a group social responsibility as there is in public education, even if that is eroding a bit. The other thing is because that agency is so strong, nobody has told them that they have a right to ask for help. And I think the way to engage parents is really to tap into that frustration and say, you have a right to ask for help on this. You know, the average cost in some states is $13,000 per child. That is more than in-state college tuition, and there are no student loans for early childhood education. We are at our breaking point. Our children are going to fall behind because they don't have what other children have. We need to be vocal in our frustration with this. And I actually think that social justice groups need to take this up as one of the big charges in equity. Equity happens through equitable access to high quality early childhood education that right now is mostly going to affluent children.
Here's another question. I'm not sure if your research looked into this. Is technology like cell phones and apps, etc., seen by parents as a viable way to provide universal equal access to educational resources for birth to 5?
We did not ask about technology, but if you look at the components that they want in early childhood education, they want their child to be known, they want their child's full potential to be known, and they want a partner in developing it. If you can find an app that does it without selling their data to some worldwide movement to make them eat things they don't need to eat and buy things they don't need to buy, I don't think that's going to happen. This is about human development. They understand it. And while I'm sure that they would want their children to be technologically savvy, what they really want is socialization. And that only happens through interaction with other children. It doesn't happen through, and adults, it does not happen through interaction with an app.
Okay. I know there are several funders on the webinar as well, and I'm wondering what your takeaways for those who are in philanthropy from this research. What does it suggest for them?
Well, I can tell you that some of the funders who had funded this, Buffett was one, James Walton in his investments or others. And then, some of the advocacy groups like Campaign for Grade Level Reading have all looked at this, and the big things that are coming out for them are that we really need to change parent engagement and the way we're engaging parents. We need to respect them and stop treating them like children, and need to communicate with them on a simpler basis about the values they have for their children. This was actually the big learning among developmental providers, that they had to take a developmental approach to parents in addition to taking a developmental approach to children. Other funders have seen that this is a wake-up call about equity, and that equity is really equitable access to fundamentally ideal early learning, and that if a child doesn't have it, it's just going to perpetuate inequity for a long time. And, you know, that is so supported by the research that other people have been doing throughout communities. Heckman, there was just a great study on public Montessori programs or early childhood programs, both in Connecticut and South Carolina, that indicated that when low-income kids had access to these programs, all the children had better learning than in traditional settings that were non-developmental, and that it actually almost closed the opportunity achievement gap between low-income kids who were treated and affluent kids who were in the same classroom. So these are critically important findings for funders going forward. I think it says that quality needs to be ideal, and that ideal that we can't compromise on anything else. The science is there, the parents are there, and it's what works.
And Tracy, I would just add to that there's a capacity issue here for providers. So in other words, we know that the demand is quite strong, but for, you know, funders on the call, it's these programs that really need to figure out how they can reach more children. And it's, you know, it's not about getting parents to understand what they need. It's about providing the actual programs that parents can enroll their children in, because we already know that this is what they're looking for.
That's a great point. Thank you. I am not seeing any other questions. So with that, first, thank you to both the Trust for Learning and those that funded this research. I think it's incredibly valuable and informative, and we haven't done nearly enough, I think, as advocates. We would like to engage parents more authentically, and yet it's very challenging and expensive, frankly. And so this research really, I think, provides some great opportunities for us to think about what we need to be doing, and the fact that, you know, we can't just create demand among parents. We have to follow through on actually providing the needed services. So I want to thank you at the Trust for Learning for having the foresight to move forward with this, and Rich and your team for doing this fantastic work and being with us today. As I mentioned, we will share a recording of the video, and the PDF of the PowerPoint will be available. So thank everyone for participating, and please share with your networks who you think would benefit from this. And then just Rich or Mariana, do you have any last words you'd like to share?
Just keep doing what you're doing, because it's really making a difference. We started working in this field a little over 10 years ago, and the progress the community has made on all fronts is huge. And keep doing it, and you're going to reach your goals.
And thank you all for participating. And you know, please feel free to follow up on any other questions you have, and find the information on the website if you need it.
So great, thank you. And as a last point to Rich's comment, you started the webinar by talking about where parents were 10 years ago and where they are now. And I would imagine that that shift is in no small part due to the many voices and advocates across the country, including all of you who are participating today. So thank you very much, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of their Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.